Hello,
Yes,
Gabriel.
Thomas. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
You have some nice early morning sun there.
Oh yes, sun is coming right from the window.
Let's give it a couple of minutes more to let people join. Let's see what kind of crowd we get this time.
Yeah, for some reason I thought that the group will be participating in the OpenSSF meeting in Canada. Was it this week? I thought no.
So I'm not sure. So like from where I sit, so I sort of sit more like in this part of the organization that usually doesn't do like the OpenSSF, but I'm mostly driving the technical work in this. But then I think that we at least at Ericsson have other people who are more active in actually following the. So I'm unfortunately not the right person to
right. As you know,
ask. So
I'm all new here, and it's same thing. Like a bunch of Microsoft people more involved than I am.
Yeah, so we are in the same boat as well. Then, but we'll try to manage and get to know. Yeah. But I did notice that I think there haven't been like meeting notes for a lot of these. So if there is some physical meeting, that might explain why they don't have them. But I think as far as I'm concerned, we resume with regular programming. So
sounds good. Hello, Siddharth.
Hello. So I'm going to put the meeting notes document into the chat again. So please mark your presence, and if you have anything you want to add to the things to discuss, please feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, Siddharth says his mic is not working yet.
Yeah, I think that it's already a couple of minutes past, and okay, that's all right. I'll have the chat open, so if you want to chime in with anything, please go ahead, and we'll try to do it. We'll try to do it this way. Okay, so I think if we are just going to be the couple of us, I think that I can try to make some notes.
Okay.
So from my side, I actually wanted to talk a little bit not about technical things today, even though we had some really good discussions, I think, in the past couple of sessions. But I wanted to a little bit more focus on sort of ways of working and having like this meta discussion about how do we work on the guide. Also considering now that you, Gabriel, and your colleagues are working on this on the Microsoft C++ compiler guidance, so I think it would be a good sort of time to have this discussion and to try to make sure that we sort of can a little bit like harmonize just like these kind of things that we know have been like an issue in the draft. And as well, I think we are also now getting more and more contributions from outside this little group, as I think it's evidenced by like these open issues and pull requests. And I think it sort of would be good to could a little bit talk about this, that how do we want to sort of organize ourselves.
Agreed. So I think Randall and George just joined. So I don't know if they get the link to the doc or.
Yeah, I can.
Hey, good morning. No, I just joined.
Oh,
Good
hey,
morning.
Avishai.
Hi.
I'll repaste the link. And okay, Avishai, you haven't joined this little group from before, have you?
I think I did once, but yeah. So I'm Avishai. I'm with Microsoft. I issued I opened an issue quite recently on the repository about the Microsoft stack missing from the current guide. So I'm here to help move along this process as much as I can.
Yeah, welcome. And yeah, I think that we are very much looking forward to the contribution on the Microsoft side. I think that will be like a great addition to the guideline. Yeah. But I think that if no one objects, I would like to spend a little bit talking about these sort of like ways of working and these kind of issues today. And I don't know, like maybe sort of given that we now have you here, so are there from like the point of view of like this Microsoft guidance, so are there from your point of view any kind of things that you see that we could sort of actually spend time on today? I had a couple of things on the agenda too, but of course you have the open issue, and I think that actually like also like organizing this work around like these issues, I think would be like a good way of going forward as well.
Yeah, sure. I think that first of all, like Gabriel, who's been joining the calls more often than I, is the one who will be leading this together with Michael Fanning from the Beamskim team. So I'm interested in the process that we'd like to have to be able to make this contribution. But I don't want to take too much time from your agenda. So maybe we can park this and get back to that after the regular agenda. What do you think?
I think that we can. So I think that we have. So what I usually do for the regular agenda is that sort of I sort of try to prioritize somehow, and usually we have like a lot of these open issues to discuss anyway. We won't get through. Won't get through. So I think that it's okay to spend time on these collaborative things in the beginning as well. So I think that. So I think that maybe like from my side, sort of the two things that I picked up from our past meeting notes is that we had sort of one suggestion from Randall around basically having like some kind of stable versions of the guide. So I think that we are not really there yet because we have sort of still sort of a couple of different documents we have been merging. We have sort of these big contributions coming in, such as like the Microsoft guidance. But I think that this would be kind of like a good thing to discuss already now. That do we want to sort of aim for some kind of like a stable release, or do we look more of this as kind of like a living document, right? So I think that it will sort of like it's part of like this larger OpenSSF best practices repository. So Of course, there are a lot of this other guide being developed in parallel there, but I think that we could sort of consider this, that if we want to actually say that we have certain stable versions, but I think then it's also up to us to define what those milestones we want to meet are, and maybe also think about that, can we actually publicize this guide at some of these milestones, because I think that sort of this would be like a really nice piece of guidance to actually try and get some attention to as well.
I see merits on both sides, like having a living document allows us to accommodate for the unsynchronized release schedule of the various tool set, GCC, Clang, and MSVC, and other compilers. So having living document allows us to very quickly integrate information as they come in. On the other hand, you make a very good point that if we had like milestone, let's say V1 or V2, we can very much point people to, hey, look at this version. Maybe something in between is that we always strive to, we have the living documents, and then we have the most recent stable document that we always point people to, like, this is the most recent vetted document, and we just use that. And then why are we continuing working on this, on the trunk?
Yeah. Randall, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was gonna say we could tag releases on GitHub, so we could basically have both in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also, just to chime in and to agree, having some sort of release would help us to also, I don't know, write a blog post or something, obviously, about it. So yeah, I would like to see that happening too.
And I don't know, maybe Sudesh can answer this, but every so often I think certain flags do get changed around or merged and whatnot. So
so we try to keep it stable
right.
for the most part, but there's obviously the introduction of new flags,
Right.
which is, but then we already mentioned that in the table, right? Where we mentioned the flag and then the version from which it is available. But yeah, I'm not opposed to having like a checkpoint every compiler release. That would probably be useful, where someone could very conveniently point at a specific version, saying that here you're using GCC 14, so these flags would be perfect, and here's the the tag in the GitHub repo which kind of gives you the entire details of all of the flags that you can use.
That's actually like an interesting point that I hadn't considered. So you sort of want to tie like the releases of the guide with specific compiler, like the compiler release schedule. But I think maybe like one point that I would maybe sort of want to a little bit discuss more is that like currently we are saying that we sort of also want to cover like older compiler versions right now, right? And so just to clarify, so are you sort of like suggesting that we should have like versions of the guide for different compiler versions, or is it still that we sort of have one guide which sort of has everything, but then you can sort of pinpoint like which release has the latest information about the compiler?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I did not suggest having like a different version for different compilers, but checkpoint that the single document at various points where we say this is true up to GCC 14. Something else might be true at Clang 18 somewhere in future. So we don't need to name the tags based on the compiler versions, we could probably do it like at a 6-month cadence or something like that, which kind of loosely coincides with the compiler release dates. But yeah, something like that, where we have snapshots that we can point to for various distributions or releases.
Yeah, that sort of also like chimes a little bit together with this. So we had like this open issue from David wanting us to look at specifically like the new features in GCC. I think that like with the latest GCC release, and I think that having this sort of workflow, I think also makes sense, right? So like eventually we are like, I think that now we have like sort of like a big backlog of things to look through. But I think that once we sort of be able to work through that, I think that's sort of like the maintenance of the guide, I think happens quite naturally like this, that we follow what are the new features and then we do an update. And yeah, maybe it sort of naturally comes that the schedule sort of follows these. So yeah, that could be like a possible possible sort of driving force for like our internal milestones. Yeah. Then another sort of consideration is, of course, that when will we be able to get there, right? So I think that we still now have quite a lot of, I think, work to do before we reach a stable version. So at least from my side, I would hope that we can spend a little bit more time in going through we still have some material in like this initial drafts, and then of course like this Microsoft work as well, and potentially the Intel work. But maybe after sort of these big packages are merged, we could consider a kind of like a more regular schedule. You have a comment, Gabriel?
Oh yeah, I was going to ask for the milestone, what are your thoughts about how to drive it? Would it be driven by, let's say, feature set, meaning that a fixed set of topics that need to be covered, and when we're done with that and we release, or is it more dates driven, which is, I don't know, by September 30th, whatever's in the document get released? You know, any thought on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So I think that from my side, I'm open to either one. Does anyone else have any opinions on are there pros and cons?
I mean, the an obvious cons of having feature set is that it might take a while before we get it completed. And the cons of having date driven is we most likely have a bunch of sections TBD, and I don't know to what degree that reflects on the quality of the overall document. And so, but you know, there are also pros on both sides. I mean, pro for feature set is, well, when we release something, we know it is a certain shape consistent and well contained, and for a date driven release, well, we know we have to get that thing done and we execute for it. So
yeah, so like my sort of initial thought is that I think that we are maybe, you know, I think that initially it's going to be like this feature based, right? So we still have we still have sort of like a couple of big these big subcategories to work on, as well as I think interesting, you know, interesting discussions around how we sort of present the information, like dividing into different tables. And I think it will probably take like a little while before we get there. But I also wanted to sort of start this discussion exactly for this reason that Georg pointed out, right? So I think that there are sort of like opportunities to publicize the guide. I think we should actually do that, sort of to make sure that the work we put into it is actually also noticed.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, but I think that maybe there is sort of like these obvious packages that we want to finish first, right? And I think that maybe we can then bring this bring like the question of doing like a first release up when we are sort of happy with sort of like this big like the going through like the old guide and then the Microsoft work, and then finishing up the changes that we have sort of concluded we want to do based on these discussions. And I don't think it necessarily have to be, you know, complete, but I think that as long as we can get it to a point where it's consistent, that I think would be, I think, a sort of like a criteria we could use to decide to go forward with a stable version.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are there any reflections on that as a proposal? Yeah. But it seems that this sort of somehow tying it together with the compiler releases seems to have some support, at least. So I think that can be something that we can we can sort of aim towards, and for like a regular schedule.
Okay, so given the number of compilers run, is it up to us or is it up to the contributors from those compilers to kind of, I don't know, write a blog post and say, hey, for this version of the compiler, look at that version of the document?
Like, do you mean like the who will publicize this, or who will?
Yeah, essentially, is it us, like this group, who get to monitor each compiler releases and the, you know, publicity, or is it the, let's say, the community representative of those compilers within this group who will be in charge of that?
I think that's like, in practice, that's an open question, right? So I think that we don't currently have representatives of every compiler, right?
Yeah.
So I think that from my side, I would sort of leave this up to those of us who actually represent the compiler, whether they want to you know, publicize this guide on their own. But I don't think that prevents us from publicizing this through OpenSSF. Or do you have I think Georg suggested this blog post. So did you have like an idea for where to publish blog
Yeah,
posts?
a blog post is probably an uncontroversial thing, but at the end of the day, ideally we want developers to pick this up, right? So you need to create a little bit of awareness for the document. So otherwise we would just do it for ourselves. The compiler folks, of course, yeah. I would try to publish really something in the blog and then make both the developer and the compiler side aware of this. Maybe the compiler folks first, to give them a heads up saying, hey, we've done this, feel free to take a look. But then for the adoption on the developer side, I don't know, yeah, really create a blog post and mention it elsewhere. We also should mention that maybe we should bring it back to the larger TAC. So CROP, the larger group, CROP obviously is aware of this. Maybe we want to report this out to the TAC at some point in time as part of what we've done. Yeah, I think that's just valuable in general, pointing people to this.
Yeah, Siddharth, you have a comment?
Yeah, so when I made the suggestion of tying it with compiler releases, I was thinking of basically cadence. Like for example, GCC has a release roughly every April, May, right? And Clang's releases are, I think, at least for the last 5 years, it's been March, April, and September, October. So if we have releases that are like document releases that are, say, December, June, like one release in December, one release in June, then it gives us enough time to kind of collect new features in whatever compiler that we want to target and update that and checkpoint that as like this new thing that has happened in the compiler flags space. So the June release will probably be busier because you'll have GCC as well as Clang to cover. But then the December one will probably be a little easy.
Yeah, I actually like that idea. I guess that it's sort of like a thing where we have to maybe get a little bit of experience, sort of how this work will go in practice, and we can sort of then sync the schedule depending on how much time we feel we need after each compiler release. But
That's right.
but I think that generally there isn't like a huge amount of sort of new features coming in. So I think that sort of like the most important thing would be to just make sure that we are sort of aware of what's happening. And I'm sure there is volunteers to actually then write the material when new features come in and help in editing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So this group is defined as a project, right? As a project under the best practices working group, because I think that there is a life cycle that projects at OSSF have to follow. So I think that right, there is the life cycle that is sandbox, incubation, and graduation. So I think that fits best with finishing the release and then going back to the working group, and then the developer adoption and the work group adoption should support that for long term, right? So maybe this group is not the long-term support of these guides, but the working group is.
Technically, I would say it's not a project, it's a working group, really. A project, there's been quite some discussion some time ago in the TAG trying to figure out these life cycle matters. And a project would really more fit to something like, a code producing activity. SIG-Store is maybe a bad example, but scorecards or something like that. That's a project. Whereas many of the documents being created and maintained in the OpenSSF are more like working groups. So and the working group has a much simpler life cycle in the sense that it is active and and then it may or may not shut down at some point in time. Whereas a project obviously is more like, and that's also inspired by the CNCF life cycle. The graduation steps are defined also in terms of adoption. How many different maintainers do you have, and so on. It just feels to be, that our little activity is not really a project from that perspective. Just to clarify how I think this should be read.
Yeah, I think that we've characterized ourselves as like a sub-initiative underneath this best practices working group. But I think that there's also like sort of two ways to look at it. So you can look at this sort of like life cycle in terms of like this overall OpenSSF structure, but I think that doesn't prevent us from having, you know, our own life cycle for like the actual technical work. And at least I have a hope that we can, you know, make sure that this document doesn't become obsolete, right? Because that's sort of like one of these challenges, right? So now we have like a lot of, I think, and I'm very happy to say that we have had a lot of sort of momentum with this, right? And very much exciting contributions coming in. But I also want to make sure that we can ensure some kind of longevity to this as well. So
yeah, that's true.
yeah. Okay, I think that was a very good discussion. Are there any other comments on this particular on the versioning anyone wants to point out still, or can we move on a little bit? Okay, if not, so you had something you wanted to discuss in terms of like this project, like the sort of like the project, Avishai, right? Maybe now would be a good time to get into that to ensure we have time of project on considerations.
Yeah, so currently we are doing some internal work to collect and curate the content that is part of a SDL and bin scheme. I think that we have some more we need to prepare more the content that we currently have before it is ready for contribution. And I guess one of the questions is, are we expecting like the same level of initial document as was originally contributed by Ericsson to be made initially, or can that be like iteratively built? So maybe, as Gabriel mentioned, different feature set which are released on some cadence, or I don't know. What do you think, Gabriel? Do you think that there is anything that we can do to make this process?
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, as you point out, I guess the problem is, so the issue is trying to figure out is the current document has certain structure. I think 2 weeks ago, we agreed to have sections and subsections and tables and linking and so forth. So the question is, for the initial contribution from Microsoft, are you expecting that all those sections be covered, or would it be okay to incrementally submit pull requests that go section by section?
So I like, from my side, I would think you should proceed in a way that makes sense to how you organize the work among you.
Okay.
I don't see, like, personally, I don't see a problem with going iteratively, and that might even be the better, like a better option, because I think that then we can, I think, probably be more effective in discussing these changes in these meetings, right? So generally we will like run out of time in these meetings, right? And hopefully we can take part of the discussion offline, but of course this, I think that we like actually make some really good progress as well in these meetings. But I would maybe sort of hope that, you know, we have like this certain, like the certain structure we have is basically that we have, like, for each option we have sort of this sort of like a high level summary that gets reused in the tables, and then we have sort of like the synopsis, then we have the performance considerations, and then we have this when not to use or caveat section. And I think it would be good to stick to that kind of format. I think that we sort of we are open to like changing these wordings, I think. So I think we've already had like a little bit of back and forth this, that maybe it should be called caveats and not when to use. I think that this is maybe a discussion we should have, but I would prefer that to have like with a sort of like a larger group present, so we can fine tune the sort of the wording. But I think this overall structure would be good to aim for, because these are the sort of the usual concerns for these options, right? So people like generally when they want to use them, they will be first consider about performance, and second when I shouldn't use these. So in that sense, I would think it would be good to address them in that sense if it's possible.
And I am assuming doing it iteratively section by section actually allows for comments, like general comments on some section, to be carried over so that it doesn't get repeated and becomes part of the knowledge. Makes sense.
And I think that the conclusion from the last meeting was that it makes sense to also have a separate table for this, right?
Yes.
So it's sort of in that sense also a little bit independent from the overall structure. And I think that we are also going to rework part of that overall structure now based on discussion we had. I think that's on my to-do list. I unfortunately haven't been able to provide a concrete proposal yet, but I hope to be able to do that too for the overall tables. But I also think that we anyway have like this clear separation, right? So I think that there's nothing that prevents pushing a new section separately without linking it to any of the tables yet, but then add the linking also like in a separate change.
Thanks. That's good. Thanks, Avishai, for bringing that up.
Yeah. Do you have anything else from your side?
No, we hope to have more update for the next quarter.
Yeah, it's also great. That would be really great, and also puts a bit pressure on me to get also like my to do forward.
Next month.
Yeah. Then I wanted to also bring up this discussion from that we started during a past meeting on like the style and implementation of citations, because I think this is also relevant for these new contributions, because presumably you are also going to cross-reference a lot of the existing Microsoft documentation. So so I think that now, of course, I don't think that we don't have necessarily like the proponents from both of these camps, since Krob and David unfortunately couldn't attend, but I would still want to sort of bring this up, because I think that we sort of have like these sort of two suggestions, and if I try and sort of cover both sides. So I think that on one hand we had this suggestion just to use like inline linking wherever it makes sense, and then on the other hand we had this sort of style that I think that we are a little bit striving towards right now, but not necessarily consistently, which is this using the internal footnotes and having like a short description of what the link points to together with the URL. I think I'm personally in favor of the latter one, and I think that sort of the way I think is that the inline linking has this risk that those links will stop working at some point, and then you don't really know what information was contained. So I would sort of, I'm sort of like a fan of this thinking about like what sort of like the practices on like this question size like Stack Overflow, where the actual like information is also like visible in the place where you sort of link to it. And I think that this footnotes may not be like the ideal solution, but this is maybe the best we can do with Markdown without sort of adding a lot of material in this, like sort of without adding can add like this supporting information, not in the text itself, but a little bit on the side. So I'm think more a fan of this latter approach. But I think it would be good to hear if there are what people here think currently. Okay, and Siddharth posted a link to something like a security features matrix. So is this related to the citation discussion, or is this?
Siddharth?
I guess that his microphone wasn't
Oh
working.
yeah, Mike is. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an example of how to format the information,
Okay.
right? So this may be more related to like organizing tables. But yeah, I think that we sort of early came to the conclusion that I think that we want to sort of encourage this, that actually like linking to the outside information as well, so that it's kind of clear where this material in the guide comes from. So
yeah,
I think if there are sort of opinions on this, I think it would be good to hear different viewpoints.
Thomas, stupid question from my side. What are you referring to with inline linking? The links we added at some point in time within the document, like from the overview to the respective sections, or something else?
No. I think so what I mean is that what I mean is like when you link to external sources, but you just do like the basic markdown link syntax, right? So you will attach it to like a word, right?
Okay.
And then like the word becomes a link, and then that just takes you to the outside, so that it's like actually part of the text, as opposed to using the footnote, as opposed to use the footnote syntax.
Does the Randall, does the superlinter, does that lint links in terms of checking that they're valid? Do you know?
I think it has this option to verify the links.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that link style would be up to us to enforce, right? And I think it's not a consideration of whether the link is working currently, right? So I think naturally we should ensure that the other links are working currently, but then links will decay, right? So like these sources will cease to be available.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that there isn't that many opinions right now. So we have this suggestion for some Siddharth to use like this matrix like things to organize information. So maybe to take this discussion forward, what I could maybe do is that I could maybe try and so we have like this README file with this contributing guidelines, which is currently empty. So maybe like the citation style could be something that I could try to write some guidelines for and add as a pull request. And I think people can comment on that there. And because I think it would be nice now, especially when we are expecting these bigger contributions, that we could try and aim towards some consistent style, regardless of whether that is. And yeah, so then there's also like the question that we are all already using like footnotes pretty extensively right now, but I think that those also need to be redone, not to use the hard-coded numbering, but an actual keyword, and that's on me. So I made this initial contribution fairly quickly. So, but I think going forward we can sort of move to using like these keywords, because the ordering will not otherwise be. But how does this sound if I try to do some kind of proposal for this, and we can take it forward offline?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I'm also then happy to help with converting whatever we have to the new format.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. Yeah, do we have anything else on the ways of working? So one thing that I was sort of thinking about is that how do we deal with these sort of reviews of pull requests? So I think that now we've sort of done this a little bit ad hoc, and I think that sometimes we are doing them offline, where people actually mark their support on the GitHub issues, also sorry, the GitHub pull requests. Sometimes we have been doing them as part of this group discussions. I think that both have their pros and cons. I think that I will try and take more initiative in merging like these trivial changes going forward, just to make sure that this sort of we don't end up with a lot of these pull requests that are unmerged. But I also hope to continue with this style of working where we actually try and discuss at least the major ones here, because I think that we've had some really good technical discussions around this. I think it's always good to get multiple points of view on these, and I hope that even though but I hope that even though we might proceed a little bit more rapidly with some of these, so if you have any sort of current concerns, please feel always free to bring up issues on this content, because I think that this is sort of the more viewpoints we can get on these, the better. Simply, I don't know if anyone else have sort of reflections on these kind of concerns of how we have been working with the pull requests so far. At least not a lot of opposition to it, at least.
No objection.
No objection.
Yeah, so also fine.
All right. Then I think we actually have then something from these recently open issues that would be maybe worthwhile discussing. So we already discussed this, the Microsoft editions, and then we had two different issues opened by Robert C. Secord on this linker option specifically. So I think that he mentioned this -z no dump and -z no exec heap, but I think both of these are as kind of like a symptom of the same issue, that these are not portable between the GNU bin utils and the Clang linkers. So, and there was this sort of like an open questions that should we be recommending options that aren't very portable, at the very least, we should be more specific about where this is supported. Binutil isn't very helpful since 50% of the linkers don't work. Do we have any opinions on this? So, okay, Sidesh, you want to comment on this?
So gold is more or less deprecated. It's been unmaintained. So using gold as a reference is probably pointless. But the question about LLD is probably valid. So when I think when we say binutils, it should implicitly mean BFD LD and not gold. In fact, there have been conversations of gold, of removing gold, as in dropping it from the source base altogether. But there are still some kind of residual users that that will hopefully move on either to LLD or to BFD in future, so that we can drop it.
But this is sort of so actually you could probably like clarify this. So I thought that this like binutils is only referring to the GNU project, but this is so that also like binutils is also used for the LLVM linkers.
No, so binutils has BFD LD and gold LD. So the two linkers that are in binutils.
Ah, right.
So
okay.
I think what Robert Secott is referring to is as 50% of the linkers not working in binutils is basically gold not working and BFD working.
Right.
And I think that argument I think is not valid because gold is essentially deprecated. It's unmaintained. So we shouldn't really be holding it as a standard for anything.
So do you think that this could be like addressed by just making sure that we would be sort of explicit about the state of support in the CLang linker or the LLVM linker, right? So I think that now we only state binutils, and there is some, I think, also some discrepancy between the versions because we are not giving the versions for all of these features. But I think that can be fixed. But should we also have then like a line that this is not supported in not supported by LLVM?
Maybe what's more appropriate would be a comment stating that gold is not actively maintained, and when we refer to binutils, I recommend that we refer only to the BFD linker in binutils and not gold. I could probably draft something to that effect.
Yeah, I think that would be great if you can have a concrete proposal on how to address that. Yeah, go ahead,
so
Gabriel.
it won't sorry, just to finish, it won't address the entirety of Robert's comments, which is the portability bit, but at least it will clarify the status of gold and the fact that we're not going to refer to gold when it comes to this hardening guide. And when we talk about binutils, we only talk about the binutils BFD linker and not the gold linker.
All right, go ahead, Gabriel.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to mention that. So this issue has several sub-issues. One is, should we even be talking about gold? And I think Sidesh's argument is gold is unmaintained, and for the purpose of issuing guidelines for hardening, we shouldn't be talking about it. But that still leaves unanswered the question of versioning. So the issue is here saying LLD, now something is not supported in LLD 12.0. I think that still leaves the question on the table. Like, so GZ has the binutils and Clang has LLD, and then when we talk about those linkers, I think we should be talking about those linkers, just like we talk about a Microsoft linker. I think we want to be more precise about which version, since which versions certain features are supported. Is that Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say that that is accurate, right? So I think it's sort of like, yeah, as you said, that there's like several aspects to this. So on one hand, we can improve in preciseness, right? And then the other is, I think, this open question that should the guide include at all things that are not portable? But I think that we've already sort of made this decision that we are happy with including things that are not portable, as long as it's sort of clear to what tools those guides, those recommendations sort of pertain to. So I think that we should sort of apply that principle consistently to also the linker, but then I think it's sort of like valid feedback, right? That we need to be more more precise. Yeah. Yeah, but I think it would be great if Sidesh can do a proposal to address this, and we can then apply that same principle. So something like be specific whether we are talking about the binutils LD or any other linker, and possibly then add a note on this that we don't really provide recommendations for gold currently because that is deprecated. Yeah, great. Thanks, Sidesh. Then there was this, then there was another comment from Robert on this libcpp assert, and I think that sort of boiled down to that there was, so there was some reference to sort of issues with this libcpp assert, which I'm not exactly sure what he refers to, but then there was also this suggestion to include the debug. And I think that now overall we've sort of come to the conclusion that we should somehow restructure the options to talk about both sort of options that are relevant for operations and like production use, and operations that are relevant for test use. So I think that this suggestion sort of falls into this testing use potentially. You want to comment on that, Gabriel?
Yeah, I was want to say that I think this points back to the notion that we kind of surfaced last time, which is that we have a topic and then how that gets implemented by each compiler. So, for example, here, originally we're talking about glib C++ assertions, right? Mm-hmm. And the purpose of that is bound checking, access to containers, for example. So we have the topic bound checking containers, access to containers. And then how is that implemented for GCC, for example? That will be what we already have in a document. And then for Clang, it will be libcpp assert. But the feedback we're getting here is that the quality isn't there yet. So because the quality wasn't there yet, their next approximation was debug, which really doesn't fit in the original topic. Like you correctly pointed out that we have testing, debug, and then release. So what the document has today is about release mode. Like when you're building your software for release, then you should have that defined. And then I think the third bullet, in the way I'm reading the issue, is that the Clang LLVM documentation itself doesn't actually say much about how to use this macro. It doesn't, like, it's not as clear as the GCC documentation is. My suspicion is it follows the same pattern, and that raises the question. So when we make recommendations like this, like how do we know that those recommendations have been tested? Right? Because the issue here is, I tried, it didn't work. And so is how do we handle that aspect of it? Now, basically, when you publish an article in the journal, you you count on the reviewers to double check that facts are correct, right? So us here, how do we handle those kind of suggestions? Do we just trust the submitters, or do we go around and check ourselves?
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? So I think like in this particular case, there were like some indications in these talks provided by the LLVM people that this is sort of like a feature that they actually, you know, it's not in the documentation that but they covered this in talks, and there is also this like active work on this in that you can find from the from like the version history that they sort of have audited it, that they conform to some properties. But yeah, I think that without having like a clear statement from the developers themselves on the maturity, yeah, I think that maybe like one option is that we can sort of try and actually then engage those developers and get sort of like clear guidance. But yeah, that's like a really interesting discussion, right? That would it also like actually make sense to, you know, work towards some kind of like a, you know, test harness for these features, right? So, but I think that sort of, yeah, I think that I think that this is also this sort of like a broader discussion that we should probably like return to. So now it seems that we're also out of time, but I think that we can definitely return to this, right? Because yeah, it could be really great to have like actually it's like some kind of like code that applies these options and provides you like some kind of like a way to, you know, actually test them, but whether or not that is sort of like within the scope of this these activities, then another question. But yeah, how about we return to this topic for the next call, because I think that this is sort of, I think that yeah, this is like broader than this specific issue, right? So how do we ensure the quality of the recommendations? Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, but we are up to the hour, but yeah, thank you everyone for a very good discussion this time as well, and let's try and see that we can push these issues forward offline, and let's return to the open ones next time. But I hope you all a very good continuation of your day, and I'll talk to you all in 2 weeks, I hope.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.